Welcome to the 3Haunted podcast, where we bring you all things horror, supernatural, folklore, mythology, and all things that go bump in the night.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm your co-host, Kevin, K-Daddy from the Dirty South, the ATL, Hotlanta, Georgia. I'm a post-production master, filmmaker, and horror nerd.
Hey guys, this is your co-host Ashley, Gorilla Girl filmmaker, lunar goddess, and cinephile.
And I'm your co-host, John Thomas, ghost hunter, super smartass, and film lover extraordinaire.
What's up, ghouls, gals, and visitors from other realms? In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about ghost hunting. Can just anyone ghost hunt? What does it involve? Who exactly do you call? Grab your EVP recorders and laser grids, kids. Join us along with our special guest as we dive into the world of spiritual presences. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Cinematic, captivating, terrifying, and intense. Trap 2021 will return live May 21st through the 23rd. New categories, new prizes, and still no entry fee. Visit trapfilmfestival.com for more information.
Welcome back, everybody. Like Ashley said, we have a special guest with us tonight. Her name is Luana, and she is the leader from Colorado Shadow Investigations, or CSI. Welcome, Luana.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for coming on to our podcast this evening.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
So good to see you. It's been years since we've all been together.
I know. I missed you guys.
Oh, yeah, I miss you too. I mean, I've seen you more recently than Kevin, but that's just, Kevin's in Georgia because, work.
1,600 miles.
I think I met Kevin, was it 2010?
It was 2010, 2011. Yeah, because we were working on a pilot together, and yeah, that's how we initially met, and just kind of grew a friendship from there and started working with each other outside of that.
Yep. And then I joined the group, I think it was like 2012, and then ended up, of course, meeting Kevin through, the whole events that we were doing and stuff. But yeah, that's how we all three got together.
Just for our listeners, what is your background with the paranormal investigating? Like, how far back does that go?
So my paranormal experiences kind of started in my childhood. I was around 3 when we moved into the house that had a lot of activity. But the house I grew up in, we had some experiences and things happened in that house. And I was pretty young when some of the experiences started, but there were things like disembodied voices that happened that as a kid, I just really couldn't wrap my head around what was going on. And then later in my life, I started having other experiences. For example, like my grandfather, when he passed away, I was able to somehow tap in and see him. The moment he died, he came to me. And that's really what left me with a lot of questions and what led me down the path to start researching the paranormal.
That's cool. I don't think I knew that.
So did you grow up consistently experiencing things like that? They just naturally occur around you and that kind of kept your interest?
Yeah, I think what happened is in our house, there were things like the piano one night started playing on its own. And my father, our bedrooms, my sister and I had downstairs bedrooms in the house. My parents were on the top level, but he thought there was an intruder in the house. And so he, searched the house, couldn't find anybody. There were experiences that my sister commonly reported to my parents that were happening to her in the middle of the night. And I always had this feeling that I was never alone. And, especially at nighttime, I just never wanted to be alone in my room. So those kinds of things were pretty consistent through my childhood. And I think that, as an adult, I feel like you have these abilities, like these psychic abilities. And sometimes I think that goes hand in hand with the paranormal. And so maybe that's what happened in our examples is that, things, we're just tuned into them a little bit more. I think the other interesting point that I like to tell people is as I became an adult, I still am friends with one of our neighbors that lived next door, and she actually had activity in her house. And so we talked about that as adults, that things were happening in her house as well. And I don't know if that was where our houses were built, like maybe the land that they were built on.
I wonder if that connects to an earlier episode we did on ley lines. I wonder if there's a similar connection there.
Well, my childhood house was actually built over coal mines.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't know if that has anything to do with the activity that my neighbor and, myself experienced. But that was something else I've kind of thought about as, I've gotten older, and maybe there was something to that.
So, at what age would you say that you went from being kind of this recipient of activity to then deciding to take action and go investigate these activities?
I think it was as I was living on my own with my first husband, and we had, our children. I think that the activity had heightened to the point of where I started tuning in to a friend of mine who had committed suicide. And I just knew he was around me somehow, like psychic abilities or something helped me understand that. But the activity started really increasing a lot. And at the time, my husband was not a believer. So I kind of was stuck between, I really feel like there's something there, but I'm also being told, like, this is just your mind playing tricks on you. And so I kind of feel like that's where it started really nagging at me. And then a few years later, really, when after I had my son with my second husband, is really when I started saying I need to like start pursuing this avenue, because things just keep happening, and I really want to know more about what happens when you die, or maybe there's something else. And by that point in time, my grandfather had already came to me, and I just didn't know what to do with that experience.
So, when you first decided to start researching paranormal activity and investigating it, what kind of information was available at that time?
As far as like how to learn how to do it, or how to.
Yeah, because I mean, nowadays, if a kid wanted to jump on Google and look up paranormal investigator, like they are going to get hundreds and hundreds of hits on local groups and local meetups and TV shows. And back when, a lot of us first started off researching this kind of stuff, we had to go to the library and look in books or
Mhm.
stuff like that. So, just
Right.
what did you find when you first started? Yeah.
Yeah, so when I first started researching it, I was at least fortunate enough to have like shows on television already when I actively got involved with the paranormal team. So I kind of had watched some of the shows to see that. I think if you back up a little bit further in what went into trying to like wrap my head around all these different areas that the paranormal covers, and of course I kind of wanted to pursue the ghost hunting avenue. But even as a kid, like I had books. National Geographic actually was one of the first books that introduced me to more of like the astronomy. And like at the time there were articles in that book that were written about being able to astral project and things like that, that were fairly new concepts at the time that I was reading them as a kid. But I was probably 10 years old when I started reading those books. When I started getting involved with like I want to investigate, Ghost Adventures was probably the first show that really captured my attention. And so I got to see their method of doing things. And that's kind of how I learned, like, okay, if I'm going to start out, I want to mimic what they're doing, and I'll get my EVP recorder like they have. And so I kind of mimicked a lot of what I saw on the television shows. And then eventually I kind of found that there was a whole different style that awaited me that I just needed to tap into. That wasn't something that you could just mimic on television.
And on that note, I absolutely love the way that she investigates. It's completely opposite of how Ghost Adventures was. It's respectful, it's personable, it's great. And I've learned a lot from Luana when I joined the team way back in 2012. Of like she said, there were the TV shows. Mine was Ghost Hunters or Paranormal State or any of those other ones. Those are the first ones that I ended up watching. And I didn't even think about the books, to be honest with you, or anything like that. I did try to do astral projection, but that was when I was into the whole witchcraft stuff and trying to do that, and never worked. Still work on that. But yeah, the way that she and her team investigated just taught me a lot about respecting the dead. Basically, you don't go in and try to pull a bunch of crap and just like disrespect everything. So I am thankful to Luana for that.
Thank you, John. I think that it's really important that everybody brings something, like in a paranormal team environment, for example, that you all bring some kind of a skill set. And I felt like it was really important to me. Energy was really big when I formed my group. And so feeling John out and feeling John's energy out, feeling Kevin's energy out was really important to me, because I wanted to, make sure that we upheld that respect for the departed, and that we didn't just make demands with whatever we were interacting with, that we were respectful. Because if it was my grandfather or my sister or my son, I would want that from whoever's coming into a location trying to connect with them. And so I just want to also say, like, I think that, that's a compliment to you guys as well, because you had the right energy that I was looking for when I formed that team.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So before you formed your team, were you on any other teams? Like, was it a progression with you started on one team and eventually you formed your own?
Yeah, actually, I started out with another paranormal group, and I'm very grateful in the experiences that I was able to have with that team. Even though I left almost like I have to start my own team. I mean, I think it was good that I started with another team to see how they did things. And really, that's what gave me the drive to open up CSI, because I quickly realized that there are certain people on different teams that don't share the same priorities when you're investigating, like reviewing your audio and making sure that you always, like, a lot of people love the ghost hunt. They love going into locations and experiencing whatever they get in the moment. But the hard work is actually listening to your audio. It takes time. It's sometimes painful because a 3-hour investigation on your audio review turns into 12 hours. And so a lot of people kind of get to the point where they don't really want to go back and do the work involved, and you weed out people that really aren't passionate about it, because it's like you can't hear these spirits all the time real time. And so you need to make sure that, like, you're actually going back and listening to what you get. Otherwise, why are you doing it? And so that's kind of, I think, what led me to opening up CSI, is that I was frustrated that, as I was participating on this other team, that it never seemed like people wanted to do the hard work involved.
I think sometimes people are in a lot of things for the thrill of it. Like they want that thrill, that, adrenaline high. And then afterwards, that's it. That's what they want. And then they're on to the next, hunt or adventure or experience.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to see how people with similar experiences going down different pathways. Because for me, listening to your experiences, I feel like I have a lot of commonalities. I grew up very young, experiencing a lot of paranormal activity. And I didn't know as a kid, you don't know what that is. And so it's just like, wow, that was weird. What's that? And you try to explain it to an adult and they're like, stop it. It's almost like we're scaring the adults. And they're just like, it's just your imagination. So some of it definitely can be alarming. And similar to what you said, speaking to a neighbor, I know I had lived in a house when I was 10 that was probably the most activity I'd ever experienced in a home. And after we had moved out, the house got sold. And a few years, I think years and years later, actually, they contacted my mom and asked if we had experienced anything weird. My mom's just like, what kind of weird? What are you talking about? And they explained what one of their children was experiencing, and it mirrored exactly what I had gone through. And my mom was just like, oh, I'm like, yeah, all my imagination, huh, mom? And so even now as an adult, you experience things, but I never had the urge to investigate it. Like the guys know I will not go into an actual haunted house because I'm just like, nope, not for me. And maybe it's a fear thing. Maybe I just don't want to validate all of those things that I've explained away, right? You just learn to over logic away things so that it's not real. And and so then it's like, well, if I go validate that with some other people, then all of that probably was real. And I don't want to open that can of worms. So it is interesting to see how people can go through similar experiences. And then people like you, it's just like you didn't let it fear you and you're out there investigating it. I think if someone like me who's like, no, I'm good, that's just, I'm fine where I'm at.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think that sometimes, kids, I think, are more in tune when they come into the world, and they land on those, I always say, like the psychic channels so much easier than, as adults, we kind of lose that. I think my opinion at least is that we're conditioned by society that you are making things up, or this is your imagination. It's not real. And so you shut things down. And I think that, it's what was interesting to me is, like, when my grandfather, I had this whole experience where the moment he died, like, he came into my room and he just, like, put his hand on the side of me. And I know why he did it. He was sick at the end of his life. And I went to go see him in the hospital. And I'll never forget his view of me. Like, I was so upset that he was all hooked up to tubes. And I think he just wanted me to know, like, I'm okay. Like, don't worry about me. I'm okay. I'm at peace, because I felt his peace. And he just, like, took his hand and, like, kind of, I could see this hand patting the side of me, but I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move. And I just remember thinking, I don't know. I've never really tested my parents out. Like, I've mentioned things to them through the years, but what are they going to think when I tell them this? Are they going to think I'm crazy? Are they going to put me in a mental institution? And that's one thing I'm very grateful for, is that my parents were always very supportive. And I just remember my mom and my dad telling me, Grandpa died about an hour ago. And I realized it was him. I didn't know at the time that it was him, but I realized this was my grandfather. And so when I told them Grandpa came to me on his way out, they were like, it's okay. I think some people just can tap into that more than others. And so I don't know, it just makes, I think that that's important as a parent. Like, if you have kids, to make sure that they know, don't try to discredit sometimes what your kids say, because you never know too what kind of an impact that will have as on future experiences or whatever. But it happens all the time. People are like, it's your imagination. You're just seeing imaginary friends. Or
That's kind of what I didn't understand growing up. It was very contradictory. Like I've explained to the guys, I grew up in a very supernatural type culture where, they're very into alternative healing and herbal healing and all of the old traditions of how you can like give the evil eye to people. And so they believe in a lot of things that would be considered metaphysical or supernatural. But when it came to paranormal activity, that's I guess where like the hard stop was, because like I had experiences in my grandmother's home and she would get very angry at me if I brought it up or was upset. And it was almost like too angry. Like, what are you afraid of that you're shutting me down? With my mom, she just never really believed in that world in general. So it was like she wasn't mean about it, but she was also like, okay, let's be logical. But there were a few instances growing up where things were too volatile around us that she couldn't deny it. I remember once we had lived in a home and I think I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. And there was a lot of activity that had happened in that house too. And at that point, I wasn't really afraid of it. I was just like, you know, this is just life. Like it's either in my head and I'm crazy or it's out there and whatever. I wasn't really scared of it anymore. And I remember we were going to be moving. We had just found a house, different house. And I feel like we listen to our intuition a little better and our instinct when we're younger. So at that age, even though it seemed crazy to me, I was listening to my instincts and I kept telling my mom, hey, can I go stay with our aunt the last week that we were supposed to be moving out? I promised her I would pack all my boxes. They would be ready. Like, could I please go stay with her? And she's just like, what's wrong with you? And I kept telling her the house doesn't want me to leave. And of course, she was very, what? No, this has gone too far. And I'm like, Mom, it doesn't want me to leave. Please, it really doesn't want me to leave. And so my mom's like, no, you're going to stay here and you're going to face your fears. You're going to see that it's all in your head. And I'm just like, okay, Mom, something happens to me, it's on you. And she's just like, and I'm going to get you into a therapist. After we move, we're getting you into a therapist. And I'm just like, okay, whatever, Mom. And I was terrified. So every night, I swear I was not sleeping because I was just completely scared. And something in me kept telling me, this house doesn't want me to leave. I'm not going to get out of this house. And I think a few days before we were supposed to move out, everybody was over. It was during the day. We had a bunch of family over. They were going to help us pack up more stuff and, pack up the kitchen. And so they're all in the kitchen, which is on the other side of my bathroom wall. And I get in the shower and I'm like, it's daytime. I'm safe. Everyone's here. I can hear them. And so I had a radio on the bathroom counter and it was playing music because I always like to play music when I would take a shower. So I get in the shower and as I'm in the shower, just this dread hits me. The sense of dread just comes over me. And suddenly the shower goes ice cold. And everything in me says run. That's it. Like my gut is telling me run. Not like check the shower or whatever. Just run. So I open the shower curtain to get out. Water's still running. And as I go to step out, the radio flew from across the bathroom, from the counter, slams into the wall. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting back in the shower. So I stepped back into this ice cold shower and I'm just like, don't know what to do now. It's really cold, but I'm in shock. And I guess everybody had heard it. This loud family hears this radio slam into the wall because that's how loud it was. They all come running to the bathroom. My mom swings open the bathroom door. I'm naked. Everyone's there. And as soon as I see her and she sees the radio shatter, against the wall, I jump out of the bathroom, out of like the shower, run past her and everyone else. I don't even care that I'm naked. And I'm like, I told you it wouldn't let me leave. And I run into my bedroom, slam the door, and I'm sitting on the bed with my blanket around me, just like, I don't even know what to do. And I'm just sitting there like, what do you do? And my mom walks in as she closes the door behind her and comes sits next to me. And she's like, you can go stay with your Aunt Becky.
You can go now.
And we never talked about that again. None of my family will ever mention that incident again.
Wow.
It's like something you'd hear in a horror movie. The house doesn't want me to leave. Like, what the hell?
I think what's interesting is, I've come to realize and appreciate like everything is energy. when you look in science, like everything is energy. And there were times like I personally would look around this house and I'm like, okay, we've grown out of like every square inch of this house or whatever. And, you start kind of forming these negative thoughts and feelings about your house. And then I've come to realize like, actually, this house is energy. I need to like communicate with my house. And I know it sounds really bizarre to people that don't really feel that way or maybe believe that. But the more that I think you can recognize everything has energy in it. And, if, again, I totally believe like there might be something in the house or the house itself may really adore you and, not want the next person to come along. So I totally believe that.
Like, you're staying here.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point about the house being energy, like, isn't that what feng shui is? Like, I know that's super simplifying it, but that could add to that energy of adding that positivity or adding that comfort to your area.
Yeah, it's all about energy flow and making sure that you get the most of the energy flow through your house. And yeah.
Similar to you, I really try to listen to my instinct more. Like, based on everything, I went through a transitional phase where I ignored any of those gifts that you mentioned that we kind of have. I tried to just suppress them and keep them down, and that wasn't working out for me. So it's like I try to just now listen to my instinct. I firmly believe instinct and intuition is just another muscle. It's like a metaphysical muscle. You don't use it, it atrophies and it stops working out for you. You use it really well, it can really benefit you. And so I try to listen to that and be in tune with the energies around me and not do anything extra, just be receptive to energy and also kind of try and do my part to put good energy out. When I move into homes, I notice there's always a way that I have to set up a room. And it's not necessarily like, well, the book says this or the window is here. It's just naturally, where does it feel good to set, especially with my bed. I'm very sensitive about where I put my bed in the room. I don't care where the windows are. I don't care where like doors and things are. It's just what feels right to me. And I've never paid attention to that because it's different every time. It's different in every room. Like, it's not, well, my bed always has to be across the door. It's just different in every room.
It's funny you say that because I had the same conversation about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And I was trying to explain to my husband, like, I am really big on the way things feel. Like when you're sensitive to energy or you start honoring, I believe, your psychic abilities and your intuition and things like that. Like you said, it's like a muscle. And so when you become really sensitive to energy, it is all about how things feel. Like I was trying to tell somebody, it's like when I go to a restaurant and I go to sit down, I'm very particular about which way I face, where the light is. Do I have my back towards the door of people coming in? It's just, it has to feel right. And same thing, we were moving furniture around in the house. And for one whole night, I had like our dining table in a certain area, and I had this couch on another wall, and it just didn't feel right. So then the next day, my husband comes down and I've like changed everything all around and moved everything. And I was like, this feels better. And he was like, well, what was wrong with the original setup? I kind of like that. And I was like, it didn't feel right. Like it just doesn't feel right. So I have to move it until it feels right.
I'm the same exact way,
Yeah.
especially with restaurants too. Like, I feel
Right.
that so much. It's like I have to pick just the right seat of where I am. And usually I don't like to be seated with my back to the door either. But I know when we were in Sedona, I actually sat in a chair with my back to the door facing the group.
I was just going to bring that up actually because I just realized that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was out of my typical, but that's just where I think there was so much energy going on there, like just with the town itself and then our energies being kind of magnified, that the idea of sitting in the circular booth with people right on either side of me was overwhelming. So it was just like, you know what? I'm going to sit in this chair outside of the circular booth. I don't care if my back's to the door because I just can't take any more energy right there. It was almost like an energy claustrophobic type thing going on, claustrophobia.
We had just gotten back from hiking.
Yep.
And yeah, wow.
I was on overload. Yeah. So the idea, honestly, when we walked up to that booth and they pointed to the circular booth. I'm like, I can't. I can't do that.
It's a good thing the other two took the booth. And Kevin.
I'm the same way, though. I can't sit with my back towards the door.
What you guys were saying with the room thing too, like I told you guys, you and Kevin earlier, I just rearranged my room and I don't have a lot of room in my room, but I put my bed like lengthwise and I didn't think I was going to like it. I was like, no, this is going to screw up everything, but it actually feels right now. I'm like, all right, cool. This is cool. Like I dig it now.
So I have a question for Luana. What makes the difference between a paranormal investigator and someone going to check the other room for activity that they believe may be a ghost? Like if I'm in a house and I know I've got some weird stuff going on, I hear a cabinet opening and closing, and I'm like, yeah, there it goes again. And I go into that room to see what's the difference. What makes the difference between someone checking under the bed or in the closet and the person that's a paranormal investigator?
I would have to say, like, we usually, if it's just somebody just checking and, looking into what might be in your next room, I think that the difference when you're an investigator is like you use different tools. So that's one of the things, like, you are looking for ways of not just understanding, like, and being curious about it, but you're also looking for ways of recording it, of documenting it. And so some of that comes, I think, with the tools that you use. I know that like some people, might just get a recorder because they know that you can record things. I also think that, being a paranormal investigator, it's not just doing this one time being curious about something, but also I look at it as research. It really truly is going towards a bigger purpose of understanding the field and, like, what are we able to say about what happens when we die? It's a research. It's sometimes putting just that one investigation that you've done towards many, many more to be able to draw conclusions. And so I think that everything that I've tried to do in the paranormal field, it's using logic. It's making sure that you can debunk things in a systematic way. I think that, I love science. I don't think that our scientific community accepts what we come up with in the paranormal field because it's not repeatable in the exact same conditions. And there's scientific reasons why it's kind of thrown out. But you do your best as an investigator to scientifically try to document and try to understand, like, where do you think, what are things? Is this even spirit activity? You question things, I think, more at a deeper level when you're a true investigator, because I've even said, I don't know that what we've always encountered is truly spirits. There's a lot of people that are convinced that certain things are demons. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference then between a spirit and a demon? You tell me, is it the aggressiveness? Is it that they're angry? Because I've had angry, what I would say would be angry spirits, that's not demonic. So I think that there's a lot of different questions that you have to ask in the purpose of research to get to your conclusions. And I can tell you right now, I've gone all over the board with what my beliefs are. In the paranormal, I started out like, oh, I think this is what it is. And the more that I've been led down this path, the more research I do, the more I'm like, I don't know that there's one answer. I don't know that I can conclusively say this is what happens when you die.
It's something that we had talked about that you just reminded me of with the energy conversation and like what is a spirit. One of the things that plays around in my head, just coming from a science perspective, and this is like borderline science. I'm applying all sorts of bastardizing things here, but we talked about like historical ghosts and how people discuss presences that eventually maybe over time the appearances dwindle down, like of that ghost or the manifestation or the presence becomes less and less and less common. We see that in popular spots like the Stanley Hotel in Colorado or other like the Blue Lady in California. Like people talk about how there used to be a lot of frequent presences and then it kind of slowly tapers down. And kind of something that jumped out at me in my mind as I play this around is we're all energy, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That is a scientific fundamental thing. And in yoga, we have in the ancient yogic kind of foundation that our energy within our body houses our trauma and it houses our more resonating memories. So our samskara. And as my mind, circles through all of these different things, all I can think about are stars. So we see stars millions and millions of light years away that no longer exist, but the light is still there because it took a while to get to us. So to us, we see the light and it's like that star is real. As kids, as adults, we're like, that star is out there. We can see it. When in reality, that star is long gone. It's no longer there, but the energy is still radiating out. right? It eventually will go away. We'll see that star flicker out, but that happened a long time ago. And so to me, that's kind of what I feel in some of what like we're theorizing here. That's kind of what I feel some spiritual presences are. As people, we are a lot of energy bundled into this little package, this little skim package. A lot of energy. We exude it, we receive it. It is just holy cow. And our brains are just crazy energy in itself, right? We give off so much heat. We are a lot of energy. So when we go, doesn't it make sense that we are similar to little stars, that we nova out and we radiate out this energy? And that energy may take a while to dissipate out because it's not destroyed. It's not just going to disappear, poof, gone. And within that energy, maybe that does carry echoes of us, our memories, our trauma, our whatever we've got built within that energy that we've been carrying our entire, life. And so when it first goes, that's a lot of energy that just went pow. And maybe it takes a while. So those are perhaps hundreds of years. We see stars millions of years it takes before it kind of disappears, that initial light. And that can take millions of years to finally show that it's gone. And that's kind of what I feel spirits might be. It's that echoing out of that energy burst. Now, that doesn't necessarily explain things like the piano playing or interacting with people, because that's not an echo, that's a live interaction.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure. Similar to your point, there are so many things out there we don't know, we can't explain. I know for me, when it comes to like demons and spirits, I feel like demons are something that were never human. It's just a different organism or life form that we call demon or demonic, but it was never human. I think ghosts were human based at some point. And then there's other things I think that exist. Spirits and sprites and all the fun things in between.
Yeah, I definitely think that like what you talked about with, more of an imprint of energy is like what we call our residual energy. There's like trauma in a location and it's a recorded episode, if you will, and it sometimes fizzles out, I think, because it was like an imprint at that time, kind of like your analogy of the star kind of fizzling out eventually to the eye. Whereas, when you have this intelligence, and that's what I think is fascinating, is I've actually believe I've experienced more of the intelligence with my investigations than the residual. But I do know a lot of people, they're kind of like, I don't know, like I just see this apparition all the time. And it's like, okay, well, is the apparition, oh, you always see it in this hallway. Well, maybe that's residual. Does the apparition interact with you? So it's kind of like trying to determine what we would say is intelligence and get that documented. And then like with demonic activity, I cannot definitively say that I've ever experienced it. I think that a lot of people are like, okay, this is demonic activity because they get scratched. Well, how do you know that wasn't just a mean spirit that was upset that you were in its space? I mean, there's some real jerks in life, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of real angry people. And when we pass and change forms, like I kind of feel like we're all energy, like you were saying, it can't be destroyed. So my belief is that we change forms when we die. So maybe when they change forms, they're still a jerk and they still don't like people or they don't want anyone in their space. So just because you get scratched or things like that, I don't know that I can definitively say like that's demonic activity. It's like, as paranormal investigators, I'd like to see a better job in the field of just really being open to, just because something scratches you doesn't mean it's demonic. Just because you get 3 scratches on your arm, could something have made 3 scratches? I don't know. But just the moment that we start to say definitively it is this or it's that, then I think that we limit ourselves. And so my thoughts on activity and how we handle it in the paranormal.
I remember early on when I first met you, you had said on our daily lives, some days we can have bad days, and why can't they? And I don't know why that's always kind of stuck with me, but it's like, yeah, why couldn't spirits have bad days?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with, I think people kind of interpret it that way, again, because if you watch the shows and you watch Ghost Adventures, everything is demonic. It's like they're going into really dark locations. They're experiencing very heavy activity, very negative activity. And so negative then has translated to this must be demonic. And I'm not saying that I am challenging anyone's, I never like it when people are like, oh, you know better than I do. Like you have to experience things, right? So I'm not saying that they don't have a sense of this is truly demonic to them. I just think that when people watch those shows, and let's be honest here, sometimes for television ratings, they are going to look at shows that will be darker in nature or things like that. So I think, for ratings, sometimes things are portrayed like they want what will trigger some kind of emotion, whether it be, ooh, that's scary. And so I think a lot of like what Ghost Adventures does is truly, going into darker locations that have been known to scratch people or push people or things like that. And so I think that your general audience kind of draws conclusions based on that. And it becomes, every time I'm investigating and something happens like that, it must be demonic, maybe because the television shows maybe have portrayed it that way. And I'm not saying, like, I want to be clear that I don't ever want to speak on behalf of what other people experience while they're on investigations. I think there's just a perception that sometimes when you have those things happen to you, it must be demonic.
Luana, what is your most memorable paranormal investigative experience?
My most memorable paranormal investigative experience. I'm going to actually go with, there was a residential case I did in Manitou. And I went into this house on 3 separate occasions because the homeowner, her house had burnt down in the fires in Colorado Springs. And so she was renting this house temporarily until they rebuilt her house. And from day one, she felt like she was pushed, had her hip broken, couldn't go upstairs. She was confined to a wheelchair. There was just, I think the reason why this was the most memorable is I have never been in a location where there has been so much audibly happening that I could hear without my recorders. And I heard male voices. I picked up female voices. But what was the most interesting was that I went upstairs into one of the bedrooms, and there was like this little weird door up in the closet. And so I was down on the floor, like looking at this door and kind of investigating what it was. And we had a recorder going, and I was with 2 other people on my team, and the homeowner was standing by the door. And she ends up at the time that she heard it, we all heard it audibly. This little girl laughs, and we picked it up on our recorder. And so we went back and the homeowner said, "You heard that, right?" And so we said, "Absolutely." We all audibly heard it, but we had also picked it up on the recorder. And that little girl today is still with me. She actually goes on every investigation with me. She used to only come through on some, but she's been coming through pretty much every investigation. In fact, I did one on October 1st, and she came through in that one. And so her name is Edith. And I think both John and Kevin remember Edith, but that was probably my most memorable investigation, just because I actually stayed the night there. I ended up going in several times because I was so fascinated, like, why this location? Why can I hear so much audibly in that house than some of these famous locations that we've been to that are known for their hauntings?
Did you guys ever figure out?
So I have some theories on why there was so much activity, but one of the theories I had is that it was next to a landfill. And I always wondered if, like, there were a lot of bodies or something that maybe had been dumped, and that's why they all came. This house was kind of like sitting on its own acreage. So you couldn't say it was like the neighbors that you were picking up on, because you didn't even see the neighbors from where this house sat. But it was very, very interesting. And actually, when she asked the homeowners about this activity that she was experiencing, like, they kind of denied it. The man that owned the house denied it and didn't want to admit that there was activity. And then she was at home one day, and his wife came and didn't want to even come in the house. And she said, finally had this conversation with the wife, and the wife said, "I don't like coming here." And she said, I don't ever want to stay here again. And so then this client of mine said, "Well, why don't you like it here?" And she's like, "My daughter and I had some experiences, and my husband really doesn't believe there's anything to that, but we just had these things happen and we don't want to be here anymore." And then they found out that there were previous paranormal investigators that had also investigated the house. So somebody must have had some, experiences, but I kind of chalked it up to maybe there was with the landfill, and, maybe that's what happened. Because even with Edith, I've tried to look up like missing persons records on her. I don't obviously have a last name, but I have her first name. And, I think she's around 3, maybe 4 years old. There was also this dark entity with her, this male that would always speak over her. And, I have a couple spirits that always are with me on investigation, Seth, Steve, and Edith. And I kind of had tapped into them to help Edith get to a better place. It sounds very bizarre, but it's really a cool story of all these beautiful spirits that like help me on investigations. So that one I think is probably my most memorable, just because of all the different things I interacted with when I was investigating there.
I think I actually went with you one of the 3 times that you went down there, and we had all kinds of stuff happen. And I think Edith was still new coming through at that point. So we were still trying to figure everything out.
I think you were with me on the first investigation. And then when we went back, we didn't realize that she was coming through until we did our audio, which was a couple weeks later. And then she came through at the melting pot. And that's when I was like, okay, I knew she had followed me from the Manitou location.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because this was the house with all the rooms that kind of like went in a circle-ish.
It's like a 7,000 square foot house.
Yep.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
very big house that just didn't make any logical
Yeah.
sense either with the way that they built. They just kept adding on, but you'd have to go through like a bedroom to get to the bathroom and then continue through the bathroom to get to something else. It was kind of a bizarre layout.
Right. It kind of reminded me of the Winchester house, basically, in that concept. So I see Kevin was kind of going to go there.
Just how you're describing it, because I didn't go to the Manitou with you guys, but just how you're describing it, sparked the Winchester house.
So something you said actually kind of sparked a question for me. You've picked up these different spirits along the way and they kind of stay with you and go to investigations with you. Now, doesn't that ever concern you that these entities are able to connect to you without like your permission or knowledge and stay connected to you through time? And how do you know that those are harmless presences?
So I think it all comes down to like your beliefs. Like my belief personally is that I'm protected by a lot of light. Like I don't ever feel like I've truly connected with demonic entities. I'm not saying they don't exist. I just haven't experienced them. But I do feel like, with these entities, I'm really big on intention and setting your intention. And with researching, that was kind of what I wanted, was to set the intention that spirits will show me what I need to see. And I feel like they came as a way to guide me. I really do feel like they've been guiding me. Like Seth and Steve are kind of like my guides now. And I have a really close, like intuitive friend, Trenny, who she's just amazing. Like she gets to another level that I've never seen any other intuitive get to. And actually, I just had a reading a few weeks back, and both Seth and Steve came through in that reading. And so one of the things that Steve wanted me to be aware of is like, we're friends, like we're okay, like we're friends. And I trust, like, out of all of the intuitives, she also feels like they're just beautiful entities. And I think like intuition, like I believe your body gives you signals. That's kind of what I believe is your intuition. You either get that gut instinct that something is wrong, or that your body is communicating, like maybe it's your higher self. I don't really know what people's beliefs are, but like maybe my higher self guides me through my life. And that's how I get my intuition signals. So my higher self is telling me yes or no by what I feel and what I'm experiencing gut wise. And so when I'm around these entities, I feel goodness. I feel that they are pure. And I'm a very big believer in you create your own reality. Like what you look for is what you get. What you focus on is what you get, kind of like law of attraction stuff. But I look for good. And I don't really have a lot of examples, even though there's some angry things or some things that I would say are a little bit darker. I don't really connect with a lot of those kind of entities. I usually connect with these beautiful, wonderful spirits. So.
And I want to bring up Seth and Steve again. When we went to Jerome, we were in some of the most haunted rooms. They were basically, I think it was the surgery rooms. I can't remember for sure. But there's these things called crawlers that are there that I have seen part of and heard different stories of. I know Maddie was kind of scared at some point, and Seth and Steve came through the spirit box when we were recording. It just basically, we asked, hey, are you guys here? And they said, yes, Seth, Steve, which was great that they popped up because, they didn't just stay with you. They followed family, basically. And we asked them, are there crawlers in this room? Is everything going to be okay? And they both said no. And it was cool. It was comforting for everybody, I guess, basically to keep, they were keeping the scary things away, which was cool. So Seth and Steve has definitely followed us.
Yeah, the last investigation I do, I have recording after recording after recording of Seth and Steve and Edith as well. But I was trying to explain to the homeowner when I went into the last investigation that this is something that I look at them as like my spiritual, like they help me on investigations. So what I have like a whole methodology I do when I do my investigations, but I usually call out to them and then I ask them, can you help the other spirits or whatever's there, communicate through our tools and understand how to do that. And I have recordings of them saying, I'm helping them understand, and they repeat a lot of what we say to the other spirits. So you have recordings of me saying, can you talk into this device and let us know? And then you hear them repeating what I'm saying to the other side or whatever. But I just feel like that's what their purpose is like to guide, but also they're like my spiritual helpers. If that sounds crazy, but I know Kevin and John, you've seen firsthand like how they come through and how they interact with us, and that they really do help on our investigations to know, is this something that you can handle? Is it something that you can help with?
I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that, like you said, our perception is our reality. The only thing that I struggle with is that, like, I think about my experiences as a kid and like what tends to present itself to me. And even my experiences as I've gotten older, it does seem like I have an affinity towards drawing out like the darker, meaner, angrier things, even when I don't want it. Even when I'm like, I believe in the light. And, I call her my meta mama. She helps me if I'm just going through a really hard time of maybe being overwhelmed by this stuff, and guiding me through like light work meditation and stuff like that, which is absolutely helpful. But I do think sometimes we have an affinity towards things, and why that is, I don't know. Because for me, it's like, I don't feel I was born wanting the dark side of life to appear to me and approach itself to me, but it feels like that's what's consistently been present from young childhood on.
Yeah.
But then there are people like my meta mama who it's almost like she's got blinders on, like the dark world can't see her and she can't see them, which I guess is good, but it's also, I guess, not good if you're out there investigating something and trying to clear it. But to her point that she's made to me before, she doesn't have to see it to clear it. And which I think is great. But for me, it's like, okay, we understand the purpose of light workers and those who see like the light energies, right? And the lights that draw in the lighter spiritual elements. But what is the purpose of those that are the opposite of that? And not the ones that are seeking it in and drawing it in, intentionally manifesting it like through spell work and rituals and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But those that are naturally, that's what presents itself.
Right. But maybe in my opinion, maybe it's part of your purpose. Maybe it's part of your learning. Maybe it's part of the plan to help you understand things. Like I feel like, why am I sensitive to energy? And I feel like it's a big part of what I was supposed to do in this life, what I'm supposed to be learning. And so sometimes I feel like, even if you're not looking for it, and I say that like when I said earlier, like I don't look for the dark, I connect more with the light. I know other people though go seeking the darker things, right? That thrills them. And so maybe they connect with that more often than the light things. But I think when you don't want it and it comes to you, in my opinion, there's a lot of lessons. Like I think that with, and maybe learnings from that. Maybe that's part of what you're supposed to be working with. Like maybe it's making you who you are with the work that you're doing in the spiritual realm. And that's kind of what I also think, like, I have a lot of dark, like medical stuff that has happened. And why do I get thing after thing after thing? Well, it's part of my journey. That's my belief. I have to do something with these dark episodes that I have. And it's really on my path to help other people. Like that's my belief. So I kind of feel like even if you don't ask for it and you don't really want it, sometimes it's there to teach you or to help you achieve bigger things. It's just so interesting when you start looking at all the different, experiences that people have. And I feel like, as an empath, I pick up on people's energy and their emotions and, people like even the living, just to clarify, like the living just constantly will be wide open to telling you their whole life story. You know what I mean? When you're an empath, like you attract that, and so I get that to a degree.
You ever want to just tell people, get it under control?
Yeah.
I'm tired of feeling everything you're feeling.
Yeah, as an empath, that's really draining. You have to really work to block a lot of that so that it doesn't drain you. Because it's just like, metaphysical fairs, for example, walking through that, I always am picking up everybody's emotions and people getting readings who are like talking to loved ones that have passed on and they're crying. And then the next thing you know, I'm experiencing that sadness and that despair and I'm in tears because it's their emotion, but it's like you have to really work at blocking. And
So you mentioned that part of paranormal investigation is the equipment you use and going back through to assess what, review what you captured. Now they have made it a whole lot more, I guess, mass people friendly. And I'm curious what you guys think because you all three do the investigation. You've done quite a few, so you're familiar with how it works, how the equipment works. I don't know. I hear EVP, I hear all of these things, and it's like, okay, you hit record on a recorder. I don't know. But I know there's a lot of equipment out there, and you know how it works and why it works the way it does. So for me, I have to ask, there are so many apps out there now for paranormal investigation. And I just want to be direct. Is it bullshit or is it legit?
Are we talking about the phone apps?
Yes, phone apps.
I'm pretty sure they're all bullshit.
I tend to think that they're more for entertainment as well. I think that like some of them record. I know I've had people on some of the events that I've put on come with their apps, and sometimes it's just like random things, or just programmed in my mind. It feels like it's pre-programmed with paranormal terms, to die or whatever, like, and some of those things will just I don't know, like there's one that has like a little like dot or something, and it like is tracking where the entity is in the room or something. I don't
Yeah, the
Ghost
radar.
Ghost
Yeah.
radar.
Yeah.
I preferred like with my tools to know like what are the scientists that are actually designing like the EVP recorders that we're using and those kinds of things, so that I think it's more credible. But I'm not going to say 100% that they're entertainment. It just feels like that the apps are more entertainment.
Yeah, because I know that like the EMF recorders, like are our phones even capable of doing that? And if they are, maybe those kind of apps are a little more legit. But to your point, you see some of them where it's like record ghost voices in the room you're in, and you hit record, and then suddenly, like you said, there's a pre-generated word that pops up, and it's like, okay, how legitimate was that? And it almost feels like one of those Facebook quizzes where you just hit play and it like randomly cycles through something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like sometimes what happens, what was the tool, guys, that would give you the words every now and then that would speak?
The Ovilus.
The Ovilus, I was never a very big believer in. The only reason why is I felt like it just randomized, like some word would come out. And I know that some people swear by it. They're like, oh, I was, in this one location and it like said something that was very relevant. But most of the time it's like, I've had just these like random things like bean.
Bean.
Oh, did you like beans? Like, is that what did you like? Was that your favorite food? Then it's at one of our events, someone came with one and they were like, gym. And they're like, do you know, was this a gym that somebody worked out in? And I'm like, what? And I think like people try to make sense out of what it's giving you, but I just have never been a big believer in them. I've always told my team, like, if you want to like experiment with it, I'm never going to tell you can't, because that's again towards research, but I just prefer on certain events that we don't use them because I think the credibility goes down.
What do you typically use? Like, what's in your bag, your investigative bag?
Yeah, the main thing that I like to use, obviously, is my recorder, my digital recorder. And the one that I have does record at a lower frequency than your ears can process. So that's where a lot of the spirit voices that we record will come into. My digital recorder is just a must have that records everything. And then I like to take different kinds of EMF meters. So I have what's called a REM pod that I'll set up across the room with an antenna on it. I have some digital and some analog ones that I use just to look at the, electromagnetic fluctuations or content, just to see if there's anything there. And sometimes if you get some activity, you can try to, see if you can get them to light it up and then shut it off and kind of experiment visually with it. So that's why I like to use those. My favorite tool, which was one that I was most skeptical of when I first started using it, is the Spirit Box. And so I love the Spirit Box. I don't use it the way that like a lot of the TV shows use it. I feel like I dial my guys in on AM, but it's like a little radio and it scans the frequencies of the radio, and it only lands on each frequency for just a split second before it moves on. So usually the reason I like that tool is because when you're asking a question and they're coming through, you hear their voice real time, and you can actually hear how many times it's already gone to the next frequency. When their answer comes and it's already crossed over to 4 frequencies, then it's not just that one radio station. So I always use the fastest scanning rate. And that's where I have like literally conversations with Steve, Seth, Edith. So that's probably my favorite tool.
And if I can touch on the Spirit Box, like I was so skeptical on that thing from the get-go. And just because it's, I heard you're scanning through radio frequencies, and it's like, how do you know you're not hearing like blurbs from a certain radio station or whatnot? And which is why I like that you use AM, because it's harder, like the quality of the stations are a lot lower on those. But when I had taken a recording of the Spirit Box and pulling it into, say, Pro Tools and looking at the audio waveform and seeing how it's only on a specific frequency for like 20 milliseconds, so not even a full second, and being able to see these clear chunks of like frequency comes on, frequency goes off, frequency comes on, frequency goes off, and being able to see these chunks, and then all of a sudden having this waveform that spans over, a full second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, it's amazing to actually see visually the waveform of whatever's coming through going over so many frequency changes.
Now that sounds pretty hardcore proof that there's some kind of existence out there. Why, if that's able to be consistently done in a specific location, why isn't this more widespread knowledge of like some things out there? Whether it be proven by scientists or proven by, I don't know, on the news. Why isn't this something that's newsworthy? Because that sounds pretty consistently like you're eliminating a lot of potential causes for why it's not spiritual. So I'm curious why that isn't something that isn't more out there.
I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that, but I kind of feel like, we do see it used on a lot of the ghost hunting shows. And I think that everyone has, I don't know about anybody else, but I know from what I've seen on television, like they usually are just looking at FM because FM can go so much faster than AM. And so, they do use it in a lot of ghost hunting shows, but because it goes so fast, they're lucky if they get one word, right? You might get one word responses. Whereas I think that just experimenting and trying different settings, maybe people haven't even started to explore where things work for them. And so that's where I kind of like, I'm going to mix it up. I could have gone with FM, but I decided to go with AM. And so I've had people like after they listen to my recordings and they hear my name coming through, my name is Hawaiian. So if I have a radio station in Colorado, the likeliness of hearing Luana on the radio is going to be really minimal, if even existent, right? So I kind of like, people have reached out to me and said, what stations do you use? What speed do you use? Because I think that people just haven't experimented enough on different things. They see it on FM on television. And so that's what they go with. Well, you get one word responses and it's like, wow, it's a big deal on the TVs. But when you actually hear like the actual conversations, it just maybe just people haven't experimented enough with all the settings and really found where they dialed spirit in.
Now, the equipment that you use, is this made specifically for paranormal investigation, or is this something that was created for other fields that you have incorporated into paranormal investigation?
The actual boxes that I use are from different scientists that have made them available for more investigative purposes that stemmed from the original person that designed it, like with the Frank's box, actually heard his deceased son coming through this box. And it was more of an engineering tool that they had back in, in his time. He was just experimenting and was building these things and could hear his son, or at least he claimed he could hear his son. And that's happened with a lot of the people that have built these tools, had personal experiences like that with their deceased loved ones. And that's why they've made them available for paranormal research.
Is there more equipment that's been made for paranormal investigation? Like with the EMF, I have to believe that maybe started somewhere else to find magnetic frequencies and now is incorporated in, but I haven't been on a ghost hunt like that. So I don't know what type of equipment you use other than what I've seen on TV and what John has shown.
Yeah. With the EMF meters, those are always something that had started more in the science realm, especially for finding water underground and things like that. Water carries EMF. Same thing with dowsing rods. My team, I always love to experiment with those, even though in the scientific community that wouldn't be something that they would really admit as something that you could use for evidence. But I kind of liked using it just to, again, experiment with more of different kinds of tools where you have these digital EMF meters and you have then these kind of old school rods that you would use. The other thing I like that I feel, the cameras, but full spectrum is really where what can your eyes process with the light spectrum. What we see with the light spectrum is one thing with our eyes, but really where they're feeling apparitions can be captured on camera might actually be more of the full spectrum where it starts to get into UV and, the infrared spectrums. So that's kind of the other thing that I like to use.
Where do you find a full spectrum camera? I'm curious because that sounds really cool.
The full spectrum cameras are online. You can find them, really, actually, you can find them now on Amazon probably. I actually used thermal imaging cameras. So like FLIR makes the camera, which again is used for other purposes, but you can see temperature with the thermal cameras. And so with the thermal imaging, the thought process with the theories of, if ghosts are made up of electromagnetic content or their temperatures are a lot lower than your body temperature, when you see an image that's walking across the room and you can see that the temperature is not what an actual human body temperature would register at. Maybe it's 30 degrees or whatever. Maybe then you can question what is that's walking through. So that's also thermal imaging tools that you can find that were designed for other purposes that we use as well.
So now I know if I have a ghost who I'm going to call or if I think I have one. But in all seriousness, You said you were going to be bringing the CSI page up again. If someone does feel that they have a presence, is that something that you and your team would be open to investigating? Are you open to people reaching out to you, I guess is the better question.
Yeah, I think that, I'm always open to people contacting me. I still have my Facebook page up for Colorado Shadow Investigations. Eventually, I'll get my web page back up. I just, sorry, my dog just kind of crazy. With the web page, I shut it down with my medical stuff, and I'm kind of limited anymore with residential cases that I'll do, just because I take on too much. I know that I take on too much. So if somebody was really scared and wants me to help them, I'm never going to tell somebody I can't. I might just have to make the decision of whether I think I can do it or if I can get another resource to do it. So I encourage people definitely reach out to me. I will have my team back up and running it at some point in time. I just need to get through a few more little medical bumps along the way. And then once I get through those, I'll definitely be up for events again. I want to do public events so that people can actually try to experience paranormal activity for themselves too.
I know you mentioned events, and I know people can go do public ghost hunts. And I have like this foundational annoyance, I guess, where I'm kind of torn because if spirits are real and the ghost realm is real, and we're going into these entities, what they feel was their home, whether it's now a restaurant or someone else's home, what these entities felt was their home at that point in time. And especially in the public events, whether it be the Stanley Hotel or anywhere famous, and people go in to get their thrill of seeing or experiencing a ghost. Oftentimes we see in videos, whether it's YouTube or on TV, antagonization of these spirits to get them to reveal themselves, baiting them, talking poorly to them, mocking them, mimicking them. And I have a really visceral reaction to that. I think that's highly inappropriate and really disrespectful, especially if these things are real, right? Like if we knew that it was like one of those haunted houses during Halloween that people erect and pretend to be ghosts and scare people after they pay an admission fee. Like, okay, fine, do what you want to. But when it comes to actual like potential other world, someone who passed on, or maybe they're not passed on, maybe it's just another entity that was never human. Either way, going in and antagonizing them to get them to reveal their present for the sake of a thrill is really just doesn't sit well with me. And so my question to you is, how does one conduct an investigation, whether it's through a public event or a private investigation, and still maintain respect for these entities?
It's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I actually, in my public events, when we were doing a certain location, I would actually tell people, like, I'm very protective of these spirits. And like, I also have let the spirits know, like, I don't want you to feel ever like you are performing in a circus or, something of that nature. Like, I know that the spirits that I interact with on a regular basis know that they never have to come through and perform if they don't want to. There are some things that come through because they love the interaction. They love being heard. They love having somebody notice them and ask them questions and become curious. And so what I usually like to do with events is set the tone in the very beginning. Like, you're not to antagonize, you're not to make demands of these spirits. And if I see that you're doing that, like, I'm going to ask you to leave the event. Like, that's just who, these spirits are beautiful spirits. We don't want to make them feel like they have to perform. And so I feel like because I've set that intention, my spirits, some nights they might be more quiet than others. It's all on them. And if I don't get anything, I don't get anything. I'm okay with that. But I think that the spirits that do come through and interact with us on a regular basis love the interaction. And, we kind of laugh. And even Edith, like, she was not in a good place when she first started coming through in the events that we were doing. We were doing public events. And I asked Seth, could you help move her to a better place? And then eventually we got to the point where, she loves like coming through and interacting with us. And so it was like we would start singing songs. I think you guys probably remember we would say like row, row, row your, and then we'd see if she could answer it. And she would say boat, or twinkle, twinkle little, and then she'd say star. And so it was like the interaction, I think, that we give the spirits and the intention. I think it all has to do with what your intention is. If your intention is just to make demands I think that spirits are like, forget about it. It's a choice that they have too, whether they want to interact with us or not. But the ones that I think that we do draw through in our investigations are either lonely, they like the interaction, they know us very well, and they know that we are very protective of them. And I think that just the education, that's why I think they do come through for us, is that they, I think, like the way that we're educating others around and showing others, like, if you want to experience this for yourself, be kind to them, be nice to them, don't be mean to the spirits.
And I just want to point out that the shows, while they're very entertaining and they do kind of help us find new locations to investigate, they don't show everything. They have to edit, just like we edit the podcast. They don't show the 3 or 4 hours sitting there being bored with no responses, no nothing. So of course you're going to get somebody who's irritated doing that, provoking, and, again, makes for good TV. And that just screws everything up for the actual people who are investigating, like Luana and, everybody else who's respectful. And Kevin, you were going to say something?
I was, because you know me, I gotta get a weird bad joke in there somewhere.
It's about time.
The spirits that choose not to answer, are they ghosting you?
Womp womp.
Yep, there's the bad joke of the day. Dun dun dun.
Sorry, I had to. Like, I had that one written out, but
It took long
was
enough,
waiting
to be
for-
honest with you. But yeah, of course he had it written out. I actually want to share a funny little thing about the spirit box that I was going to try to throw in there earlier. This has to do with Kevin.
I remember.
So we were at Cheeseman Park with Luana, the whole group. We were doing an investigation at Cheeseman Park. Kevin had to leave early. We were doing a spirit box session in a big circle asking questions. And Kevin's like, oh crap, I have to go. I have to go pick up my parents at the airport. And the spirit that came through, we asked, hey, are you mad that Kevin's leaving? And the spirit that came through said, fucking bitch. And it was just hilarious. So it was one of my favorite things about the spirit box. Yeah, it was great.
Now, being in Cheeseman Park, is it possible for someone nearby to run over your frequencies with a similar device, or with like a trucker radio, the CB, is it CB radios? Is it possible?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I don't think the spirit box actually picks up that kind of interference. I do know the EMF meters will, for like walkie-talkies and things like that. You can get those to light up, like your REM pods, and your EMF meters will definitely respond to that, just like your phones. Like if you put a cell phone right next to the EMF meter, it's going to alarm it.
We discovered that in Sedona.
Yep.
During the editing portion, people could easily like just edit their results in that kind of a tool. But I think it would be a lot harder to like do a layover in the actual tool.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kevin. I guess a
Yeah.
ghost thought you were a bitch.
Yeah.
I was trying to look for a reason here.
I appreciate it, actually. I appreciate it. That's been eating at me for how many years?
So let's say you have some newbie enthusiasts who want to go on a ghost hunting experience, or they want to start getting into this world. How does one find investigative groups to eventually potentially join? Is it a thing I can search for on Facebook or Google on the internet? How easy is it to find and join an investigative group?
Google is your friend.
Yeah, I was gonna say Google like has a lot of information out there. You would be able to put in like Paranormal Society, and you can actually find a listing of all the paranormal societies in like Colorado. And then you can reach out to each group, see if they have a website or a Facebook page or Instagram page or whatever it might be. And then it just is really up to each group to say, like, some people are limited on how many they'll accept. Some want to know like your history, if you have any, like, some are very position driven too. Like I always had my team, we all kind of did whatever we wanted. We had a technical setup. I was a lot of the tech. Kevin, you had a lot of tech experience. But there are teams that are only taking like a tech consultant or a camera consultant or something like that. So it's not like you can just necessarily have positions for an investigator or, whatever it might be.
Well, we appreciate you coming onto the show. I feel like I have learned so much because I know nothing. Well, I only know what I've seen in movies, but I've learned so much, and I feel like I have much more respect for what it is paranormal investigators do. The guys know I had a lot of skepticism and a lot of agitation towards some of the methods used, and so just being able to talk to you has really helped me kind of become less of an asshole about it.
I think it's a good point because I get just as frustrated with teams that provoke and, are mean to and not respectful of like locations like businesses that people have to go in and work, and you're stirring up the energy and maybe aggravating it, And so I definitely, I mean, there's so many locations that have just stopped allowing paranormal investigators to come in because of that kind of behavior. And so it's good to find teams that respect the spirits, that respect, truly are trying to like research and answer bigger questions. I always have appreciation for people like that.
Do you feel you've gotten some of your questions you went into this looking for? Do you maybe feel you've gotten some of the answers to that? Or maybe has your purpose changed over time?
I think my purpose has definitely changed. I think, going into this, my purpose, I think when I first became an investigator is just to have proof that, spirits exist. And I think my purpose along the way has really shifted into understanding like what the bigger purpose is as we're here and beyond just our physical world, And so it's like every time I think I might have an answer, I have more questions, and maybe I haven't really gotten the answers that I was hoping to achieve. And that's okay. I'm okay with that because it just keeps leading me down these paths and opening up my mind to different possibilities. So I think that, as long as I'm alive, I'm always going to be looking into the paranormal. I love that I've connected with the three spirits that, surround me all the time. I actually, I have boundaries. I don't like turn my equipment on in my house. I separate, what's investigative. And I feel like I've, from what I do in my personal life, but I've also feel like I've connected with these spirits in an intuitive way as well. And so I feel like I do talk to them in ways that I don't need my equipment for. And so that's another thing that is also, I don't think was my original intention when I went into investigating, is to open those doors. But it's all been this beautiful journey that I just absolutely love, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So no matter how old I get, I'm just still going down this path, and that, Seth and Steve, they know they're free to move on if that's what there really is beyond the veil, but beyond the physical. But I love that they've been with me for so long. We're going on like 8-9 years now, maybe no longer than that, probably like 9 or 10 years with Seth. So
I appreciate how honest and like just open you've been with us. I mean, this can be one of those things where people are hesitant because we don't want to be judged in a certain way externally. And so I really appreciate how just open you've been.
yeah, you're welcome. I think the more that we can just, kind of educate people. And I think the other thing that's helped me, is I don't do what I do to prove to anybody that ghosts are real. Like that's the other thing that I think is just, I really want to help people understand is I do this for me. If anybody, learns something or experiences something from that, that's great. But like, I'll never do it just to prove to you that ghosts are real, because that's not what I do.
Luana, is there anything else you may want to say to anyone listening in terms of like the spiritual world or paranormal investigation?
No, like I said, I'm always open to people, come to my page. I mean, I haven't updated it in a while, again, for medical reasons, but I definitely will be back on doing that soon. Reach out. Sometimes I'll look at the messaging too on Facebook. If somebody needs to send a message, that's probably the easiest way until I get my website up and running again, that they can contact me. I'm always up for just even, I've gone into a lot of the education, like in the schools. The schools have actually invited me for career day, which I thought was really cool. So I went in to the middle schools and the elementary schools, and I've worked with them to just educate them on what paranormal investigators do. So I kind of like to touch all these different areas, that it's not just about doing the investigations, but it's also about education too. So
It sounds to me like you guys are doing a scientific process, even if the topic isn't necessarily what would be considered typical science. There is a scientific method to what you are doing. You are preparing yourselves, your research. You know how to use your equipment. You're using your equipment and like weeding out any factors, external factors that may be influencing your equipment and your results. And then you're following up on your results. So to me, I mean, that sounds like a scientific process.
I would agree. Yeah.
With a healthy amount of skepticism.
And the other thing that I would encourage people to do is to really start trying to. I know quantum physics is like really overwhelming, but I think the more that you kind of learn about the science and quantum physics, it helps you understand that not everything, I mean, we've been trying to wrap our heads around quantum physics for 100 years. And so I think that when you start looking at this box of science that like our Western world likes to kind of make everything fit into, even with quantum physics, that's not working. And so I think, if you get a different result if you watch the experiment than if you look away. And so I just think that's a good reminder that not everything can always fit into the same model.
Well, I do want to tell Seth, Steve, and Edith I said hello.
And Dot, that was for you.
That was for me, little Dottie. But again, thank you so much for coming on, Lou. It was fantastic to have you. I love hearing what you had to say. And thank you to all of our listeners who are listening to 300 Podcasts. I am your host, K Daddy.
I'm John Thomas.
And I am Ashley.
And if you have any questions, comments, or even suggestions for future episodes, please email us at 3hauntedpodcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to follow us on all of the social media and remember to hit that follow button. You never know what's going to happen next.
Are you looking for more awesome podcasts? Head on over to withoutyourhead.com for access to the Without Your Head podcast network, where you'll find a variety of podcasts sure to keep you entertained and coming back for more.